welcome on to an episode of Off the Carousel here on the field of 68. The new head coach of the Oklahoma State Cowboys, Steve Lutz. Steve, it feels like we have you on one of these every year, man. How you doing? Congrats on the new job.
Man, I'm doing great, and I'm happy to be back on. But I hope this is the last time for the carousel portion of this field of 68. That's for sure.
6 weeks in, have you had a chance to catch your breath yet? Do you feel like you've been able to get settled in the facilities, in the office? Like how has this last 6 week transition been?
Yeah, no, there's no way I'm settled in. Like half the time I walk around Gallagher Iba, and I'll come down a hallway and I won't know where the heck I'm at. I mean, obviously the facility's pretty big, and we added on to it, so it's kind of pieced together a little bit, and so I'll get confused half the time, and I'll have to go back to somewhere, a landmark that I know, and then I kind of get back to my office that way. But I mean, it's been great. The people have been wonderful. The administration's been fantastic. We've obviously had to piece together a roster, and I think we're doing that, doing that well, but we're also doing it with an intentional purpose, and feel like we're putting together a team that, that's going to be good in the Big 12.
Take me through that process, right? Take me through what it's like in the transfer portal and NIL era to try to build a roster your first couple of weeks on the job. I mean, I got to imagine you're sitting, how often are you refreshing the portal? How often are you texting every kid in there? How much tape are you watching trying to figure out who can actually play in the Big 12?
Yeah, no. I mean, all of the above. Everything you're saying is exactly what we're doing. I mean, you're in the office from probably, I don't know. I'm not a guy that makes everybody get in real early, but 8 o'clock in the morning, and you don't leave until probably midnight. And until you're able to figure out who you want, who you can get, and then you try to just navigate the process as best as possible. There's no right or wrong way to navigate it. I mean, some guys, you'll call them and you'll say, "Hey, I'd like to recruit this person," and they'll just say, "Hey, they're not interested." Or
Right.
they'll say, "Hey, it's going to cost $1,000,000." And you'll be like, "Well, okay, that's not in my price range on this particular person." So you just, man, you just try to do the best you can, and be straight up with people. And then, you just kind of go from there.
So you spent a lot of time in the high major ranks. You were at Creighton, you were at Purdue, but you haven't been in the Big 12 yet. So as you're sitting here trying to get ready, trying to figure out how you're going to build a roster in this league, are you watching tape on some of these teams? And as you're watching tape, are you sitting here being like, "Oh, we got Kansas, oh, we got Houston, oh, we got Baylor, oh, we got Iowa State, oh, we got Aaron." Like, has the fear crept in at all about just kind of looking at this roster of teams you got to deal with?
Well, you know what? So we had the Big 12 meetings in Scottsdale on the last 2 days of the recruiting period of all times. But so I'm sitting in that room, and I'm looking at Scott and Kelvin and Coach Self, and I'm saying to myself, "Holy smokes, where are the winds coming from?" And that's kind of your aha moment. I have looked through their rosters. Obviously, being a basketball junkie, you watch hoops all the time. And now, instead of watching other people from the Big 12 and trying to maybe steal a concept or an out of bounds play, or a set out of a timeout, now you're trying to figure out, okay, I've got to make sure I have the roster that's intact to beat these guys. And when you're building rosters, I still say the same thing. I mean, you've got to get guys that fit you. You've got to get guys that fit your system. And obviously we play pretty fast, so I've got to have guys that can run and move and pass and handle the ball. But you've got to have the right people. And I'm just like anybody else. I'm not about taking a lot of low character people. I want to be around guys that are fun to be around, but having an intense desire to win the Big 12 and go to the NCAA tournament. It's been done before, and it can be done again. And I really do believe that it can be done quickly.
So how do you go about doing that? What is this something where you're trying to build a team that can win immediately? Is it something where you want a competitive team this year, where you're looking forward and trying to make sure that you can develop that culture? Like, you've been at two programs at the high major ranks in Creighton and Purdue that I would argue have as good of culture and as good of a kind of player development pipeline as you're going to find anywhere in college basketball ever, point blank period.
Yeah, for
How
sure.
do you balance that?
Yeah, I mean, you balance with, talent and character, right? You've got to have a lot of both. And there's certain guys that still are about the name on the front of the jersey instead of the back, right? And you've got to figure out a way to find those guys and get them to buy into what you're selling. And then you've got to then recruit them and get them. But when you get the job, the first thing you're trying to do is you're trying to hang on to players, right? The portal's open and you've got good players on the roster. Coach Boynton and his staff had good players, and I'm trying to hang on to them. And we were able to hang on to a few of them. And but then once they decide, the other ones decide they're going to leave, man, you just got to go get somebody to replace them. So right now, I think we're sitting at enough for 5-on-5. We've got 10 players. And now we've got to get 3 more. So we've had some guys in for visits over the weekend and this week, and we're waiting on some decisions, and hopefully we'll get those here before the dead period begins next week. But man, it's an interesting process, and I don't know that I have all the answers for you.
That's a good sign that you're not going to have to jump in there and run the 2 and practice on the practice squad. So that's always a positive. I wanted to ask you about Peyton Mack, because I think that those are 2 of the best basketball minds. Like I love watching what Coach McDermott runs. I love watching what Coach Painter runs, and I think that they're both versatile in the sense that they change what they do based on their personnel, and they're not necessarily married to a certain style of play. Like you look at what you guys did in 2019 at Purdue and the way that you played with Carson Edwards versus what you've done with Isaac Haas or Zach Edey, and it doesn't look like the same coaches running those 2 offenses, right? So what have you taken from them in terms of the way that you want to play?
Well, first of all, I have a concept of what I want, right? And so I try to recruit guys that fit our system. Obviously we led the country in tempo last year at 75 possessions and averaged 80 points. Now, is that going to be applicable to the Big 12? Man, I don't know. But we still want to play fast and play in transition, just like I've always done. But like you said, and I had this conversation with a recruit and his family literally just 2-3 hours ago before they left campus. My job ultimately is to make the best decision for Oklahoma State and whatever it's going to take to win. And that means, if that means I need to play 3-point guards, play 3-point guards. If I need to play through the post because, you have really good post players that can score, then we're going to play through the post. But in college basketball, I mean, still the layup and the dunk's your best shot, and then step in threes they're going to be second. So if you can play in transition against an unset defense, man, that's going to raise your chances to score quickly and to get good shots. But those 2 guys, I mean, just watch what they do. If like you said, if Zach Edey and Isaac Haas, if those guys need to touch the ball 15 times a game, they touch the ball 15 times a game. And the same with McDermott. I mean, he's had years where he had, a guy named Justin Patton, who's a one and done, but he's not a back to the back basket player, right? We played him facing up the rim a lot and played him in the trail position a lot, versus Ryan Kalkbrenner is one of the true rim protectors and is a good back to the basket player. So, man, you just have to adapt to what you have and then get those guys to play hard and to play the right way. And if you do that, most of the time, things are going to work out in your favor.
If you haven't heard by now, we have partnered with BetMGM Sportsbook. We're going to be using BetMGM lines to make all of our picks, and we'll have special offers for the listeners and the viewers of the Field of 68 throughout the year. If you haven't signed up for BetMGM yet, you can use bonus code FIELD, and you will get up to a $1,500 first bet offer on your first wager with BetMGM. The best part, all you need to do is deposit and bet $10 of your own hard-earned money to be eligible. Here's how you make it work. Download the BetMGM app and sign up using that bonus code FIELD. Deposit at least $10 and place your first wager on any game, and you will receive up to $1,500 in bonus bets if your bet loses. Just make sure that you use that bonus code FIELD when you sign up. BetMGM is going to have some fun offers available throughout the NBA playoffs. Bet insurance tokens, odds boost, and what I love, a nice parlay boost or 2 from time to time, as well as a ridiculous array of player prop bets for any sport that you could possibly imagine betting on. BetMGM is and always will be the king of the prop bet. So go download the BetMGM app, use the bonus code FIELD, and sign up today. And while I've got you, a quick request. The best way to support the Field of 68 content that you get for free is to engage with us. Rate and review the podcast. like and share the YouTube videos. Tell your friends about us. It all helps in a world where the algorithm is king. And now, back to the show. Yeah, I think about the teams that you guys had in, what was it, like 2014, when Dougie McBuckets was there, but also like Ethan Rogge and Grant Gibbs. And when you're playing Ethan Rogge at the 5, you know that you have a team that is going to lean all the way into trying to make as many threes as possible. And then you look at what they've been the last 2 years with Kalkbrenner at the 5, and it's a very different style of play. And I really respect the way they can kind of bounce between those two things. Speaking of bouncing between those two things, I think you were the defensive coordinator at Purdue. Am I remembering that correctly?
Yeah.
Was that because you are a defensive guy, or is that just kind of the job that you had assigned there? And how does that kind of help you transition into being the head coach, where you now have to assign people into those specific roles?
Yeah. No. I've always kind of, as an assistant coach and just in basketball in general, I've always looked at basketball from the defensive lens. But then the crazy thing about it is, as much as I'm a defensive person, once you get your head coaching job, all you care about is offense. You're trying to figure out, okay, how can I score? And what keeps you up at night is, right, not having enough points to beat the other team. Because I think that the defensive part of it, those are your core values and your fundamentals. Guarding ball screens, you're going to guard them, 1, 2, 3, 4 ways. And once you decide what you're going to do, you've just got to be able to repeat those actions, or you've got to be able to repeat it several times during the game and at a high level. So you're not really changing but on the offensive end, you can steal a basket out of a timeout. You can steal a basket out of a out of bounds opportunity. And those are the places where you really, really have an opportunity to make a mark on the game as the coach. You know what I mean? So I, as much as I'm a defensive guy, I worry about offense probably a lot more now that I'm the head coach. But then to answer your question, man, now these staffs they've gotten so big. That's probably one of the areas that I don't want to say I struggle at, but I worry about the most. Like, do I have the right guys doing the right things? Is it their skill set? Am I using their skill set in the best possible manner so that we can get the results we want in terms of winning and losing? And I spend an enormous amount of time with that.
You've been around two of the greatest college basketball players that we've ever seen in Doug McDermott and Zach Edey. What did they have that allowed them, and not just greatest players, like greatest success stories, right? Zach Edey was, I think it was the 436th ranked recruit or something like that. No one saw him being what he turned into when he was a 16-year-old in high school. And then McDermott wasn't even the best player on his high school basketball team. He had Harrison Barnes there with him. So what was it about their player development that you saw, and what can you kind of take from that and translate it to your teams now?
Yeah, I mean, both those guys had an insatiable desire to be good or to be great. Like, I can remember my daughter was a senior in high school, and my daughters played on the same high school basketball team, and or even their soccer games. And practice would end, and I'd have to hustle over there to the game, and Zach would be pissed. He'd be like, "No, coach, we got to do our jump hook routine." I mean, he was constantly wanting to do that, and it never waned. Like, there was never a day that he said, "Nah, I'm just not going to do it today." And Doug was very similar. He had his routine. Both those guys would get in the gym and they'd work their tail off, and they'd spend an hour, hour and a half, maybe two, and then they get the heck out of there. Versus, we've had other players that were draft picks as well, and they'd be in the gym 4 or 5 hours, but they'd be shooting half court shots. They'd be working on between the leg, behind the back, stuff that's not going to translate. So to me, Doug and Zach, they were ultra focused on what was going to make them better, what they needed to do. And then when it was time to get out, they got out of there. They worked really hard at it at a high level, and then they went and relaxed. Because to me, and I say this to guys all the time, part of being a good player is taking care of your body and relaxing, going and laying on the couch and playing video games or watching Netflix. That's part of being a good player. And those guys were great at it.
I have that part down pat right now. I'm very, very good at that part of being a great basketball player. When did you when did you realize? Well, I guess what did you? What's the best way to phrase this? With the Zach Edey, right? Did you ever think that he could get to the level that he got to? Was like that a realistic possible? Even I don't even want to say realistic. Was that something that you thought he could even be in the realm of? Like we're talking two-time National Player of the Year. We're talking, I would say, a generationally great player in the college basketball ranks. He's going to be up there in the conversation with like Hansbrough, Jalen Brunson, McDermott, like that's how good he was the last couple of years. Was that something that even crossed your mind when you saw him in high school?
Yeah, not when I saw him in high school. And I'm not knocking on Zach. It was his birthday the other day, so I probably shouldn't dog him out too much. But literally, when he was at IMG, I'd have to get 4 or 5 game films, and then I'd get our video guy Nick Taruso. I'd get him to pull all Zach's clips because he'd play a minute or 2 or 5, and then he wouldn't play. And I'd put all them clips together, and then I'd show him to Paint. I'd be like, Paint, here's the last 5 games, and it'd be 48 clips, of him doing rebounds or ball screen D or jump hooks and those sorts of things. So like anybody that says that they knew he was going to be a generational talent and change college basketball, or not change it, but at least, leave his mark at this level in college basketball, would be lying. Now, with that being said, when he got there in his first summer, he gave those guys the business. Like he for a guy that had not played much, you're watching him in the summer going into his freshman year and going, holy smokes, man, he's going to be really good. And to his credit, Zach, he just worked his tail off and kept his head down and his mouth shut and went about his business.
Yeah, he's one of the best kids I've been around and to deal with, right? Like he just seemed like a genuinely kind human being, and I don't know if you can always say that about everybody. Were you happy for Paint when he kind of got that Final Four monkey off his back? Like we saw the video of Robbie Hummel crying as he was calling the game, right? Were you sitting there too, crying, watching, or were you saying to yourself, "Oh man, I really hope we don't draw Purdue in the first round of the tournament"?
Yeah, well, number one, I knew we weren't drawing Purdue. I wasn't going to be a 16 seed, but no, I mean, I couldn't have been more happy for Matt and for the program. I mean, obviously we lost in the Elite Eight to Tony Bennett and whatever that was, probably 16 or 17, 16, somewhere right in there, the year Tony won it. But yeah, I mean, I'm still heavily invested in the program. I mean, obviously I had recruited a bunch of those guys. My daughter works in the program for Foreman, the SID, so I couldn't have been more happy. My family couldn't have been more happy for him. I mean, he's one of the great guys that does it the right way and is about the right things. I mean, he wants our game to be great and spends an enormous amount of time trying to help make it be great. I mean, he sits on all them committees and all that. So again, no one more deserving in my eyes, at least.
Yeah, he loves being on a committee. I think he just likes Zoom meetings or something like that. Maybe that gets him out of recruiting calls that he's got to be on. All right, so look, this one we're not gonna we're cutting off the recording here, right? We're not gonna give away any secrets, but you've been in 3 league tournaments and you've won all 3 of them. Okay, what's the secret? How do you get this done? I won't tell anyone. I promise.
Man, I'm a big believer in you win that tournament in the 2 months before. And what I mean by that is we practice hard, but I don't kill those guys with 3-hour practices in January and February and early March. I think that you've got to take care of your body. And really, by the time you get to January, February, and March, like you're not reinventing the wheel. I mean, you're not going to change many ball screen coverages or add 15 new sets. So I really try to be mindful of those guys' bodies and where they are mentally. I always say that in order to play good, you got to feel good. And you can't feel good if coaches just berated you for 4 hours each day for 6 days a week, right? I mean, that's just tough to do, especially with today's young guys. They're not in for that. So that would be the only secret sauce I could say is I try to have them fresh mentally and physically as the season winds down.
All right, so this is what we've gotten so far from this interview. You want your guys to watch Netflix and play video games. We're talking like 90-minute practices, and you're not going to get yelled at those practices. If you are a recruit and you're watching this right now, I'm pretty sure Oklahoma State is the place that you want to be because that sounds pretty good, man.
Yeah. I try to treat them right, but I will get yelled at. If you don't play hard, man, we're gonna have an issue. As long as you play hard, I can overlook some offensive issues, if you take a bad shot here and there. But no, again, man, in today's climate, you've gotta get those guys feeling good so that they'll play good, in my opinion.
Well, listen, Steve, I appreciate the time. I'm going to let you go because I know you got a few more calls you got to make, flights you got to catch. You got to make sure you fill those last 3 scholarship spots. You don't want to be calling me. I still have a year eligibility left, and I can still shoot it a little bit, man. That's all I got left in the tank. So I appreciate the time, man. It's always great to catch up. But again, congratulations on the job.
No